There's a new vulnerability in a real common web framework that everyone should be looking to patch as soon as possible.
John, you're going to give us an update on some activity around Apache Struts and a recent vulnerability?
That's right. So most people are probably familiar with last year there was a pretty notable Struts vulnerability that came out, and there were some pretty large-scale breaches. The Equifax breach was one that was a result of the previous Struts exploit. There's a new Struts exploit that came out. It's CVE 2018-11-77-6. And last week, there's been some reports in the wild. There's also proof of concept exploits that are out there now for this. So I thought it was important to kind of raise some awareness around this one because it looks similar in nature to how it operates. So it's an important one for people to be aware of. What it can do if someone leverages against you, first they have to find that you have struts running on your, which is not necessarily trivial to do. A lot of people use Google to find websites that might be using struts because struts uses the .do and .action extensions for their web content. So that's kind of a trick a lot of people use to find candidate machines that might be vulnerable. Once you find one, the proof of concept basically gives you almost like a shell. You know, somebody who uses it against your vulnerable website basically gives them remote code execution, essentially allows them to basically open kind of a pseudo shell or command prompt on your web server, so they can pretty much do whatever they want.
So once you're logged in, you could do some kind of remote copy of some file from outside.
Right, you could do pretty much anything you want, you know. Pull more files down, malware, install like additional implants. You could laterally move to other things that might be behind that server if it's somehow you know, like in a bastion type of environment. So it's an important one to make sure that you're on top of and you get patched.
If you don't patch now, you're going to get compromised. And unfortunately, where this software runs, there's probably a lot of good stuff that would be attractive to an attacker.
Hey, Mike, did you have some thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so I actually read into a little bit of the details of the actual exploit itself. And it uses these namespaces to load up the different applications. And if you do not provide a namespace in the URL, it allows you to inject this, like you said, this object graph navigation language, basically just run arbitrary commands. So you can do things like get shells, cat Etsy password to look for users. Yeah, so basically it's almost like a form of command injection because the software actually supports, you know, running arbitrary code.
Right. And I think the previous exploit was similar-ish in nature from what I remember seeing. And I can confirm in our honeypot that we run, we have seen a few attempts of this, but not a whole bunch. I wouldn't say it's as much as some of the other things I see in there, but there's a small smattering of people attempting to do some of these, just kind of a blind attempt to use this exploit.
I did see also that I think one of the proof of concepts used Shodan to identify, you know, potentially vulnerable servers. So basically, it's like a one click and go, right? Find all the vulnerable servers and try to execute the vulnerability.
Right. So Shodan's another good option as well, because that's we've talked about Shodan on the show before. It's basically a website that indexes a lot of these, basically indexes the internet and tells you what's running on every single port and what services are running there. So that's a really wealth of knowledge for finding out what types of software and services are deployed out on the internet. So Apache has released patches for the affected versions, which is in the 2.3 and 2.5 branches of the code. So I'd recommend people, you know, go up there, update as soon as possible, especially since there are active exploits in the wild occurring right now.